Thank you very much, Jen, for that kind introduction. And I would also like to thank you and EcoWell for inviting me back to present to you all today. And I wish you all a good morning. So here in my presentation, we will be looking at claims surrounding safe beauty from the wider aspect. Okay, so as regards to the wider aspect of safe beauty claims, where am I coming from? Well, when you see articles and advertising, such as what you see in front of you, where they're saying 80% of beauty ingredients in our products have never been safety tested, as you can imagine, this really does set the heart racing, because you're starting to ask, where did this misinformation actually come from? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask all of you a couple of questions. The first is what do you, or what do we mean as an industry by safe beauty? What are safe beauty claims? Are they actually logical, justifiable, even legal? And is it actually safe to make them? So let's see. Safe beauty. Well, safe beauty refers to any cosmetic product or even the range of these products that will actually comply with all of our international regulatory requirements. So that's the international codes and all the laws governing their creation, their manufacture, and of course, their marketing to the consumers. And these requirements demand first and foremost, and you will see that if you read your cosmetic directives, is to do no harm to the consumer, and that all of the products and their ingredients and the packaging have to be safe. In brief, this means they need to be safe on the skin, the eyes, the hair, and of course the mucous membranes. Their manufacture must not harm the environment. They need to be procured safely. They mustn't do any harm to those actually making them in the contract manufacture, the lab, or wherever you're producing. And of course, their disposal must not harm the environment. So if you're tipping your excess shampoo down the drain, you know, you're not killing the fish. And of course, the consumer messages must be compliant. In other words, your claims have to be legal, they have to be truthful, they have to be honest, evidential, fair, and they have to be understood by the end consumer so that they can make an informed decision as to whether they buy them or not. And one thing I would like to add here is misinformation as well as disinformation by brands, dermatologists working out of their remit, trichologists, journalists, bloggers, influencers, you name it, will actually make cosmetic products unsafe, because what they are doing is they're spreading misinformation, and all of a sudden a harmless cosmetic product suddenly becomes undesirable. And then we have the safe beauty claims, and these refer to the messages, in other words, the claims of a cosmetic product or range that imply that these products are somehow more safe, or they have a particular characteristic that implies that their safeness is actually above mainstream products. It's a bit like the not tested on animals claim, you know, where it implies that all other cosmetic products have been tested on animals. But the problem is not all of these types of so-called safe beauty claims are actually legal, because they need to basically comply with the relevant legislation. Now, I know we have people listening in on this summit who are from all over the world, but it doesn't matter what country you're in, your respective legislation is basically requiring the same, except obviously it's worded differently. So if we look here in the European Union, we know that as regards to cosmetic claims, it refers to the text, names, trademarks, the pictures, and other should we say, figures or other signs that convey explicitly or implicitly the characteristics or functions when you label and basically present these products to the consumer, either directly or via advertising. And of course, the legislation then applies to any claim, irrespective of how you present this to your relevant audience. And of course, as we know, claims are often a combination of different types. But if you look at the right-hand side of the slide, it's not just the business to consumer and business to business legislation as regards to Article 20 that's in play here. It's also the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive, as well as the Misleading and Comparative Advertising Directive, that play a very important role, and often they are either overlooked or misunderstood. And then, of course, we then have all the self-regulatory national codes and other guiding principles that play into this as well. So they are all very important. And so when we look at the cosmetic claims, it actually says that the tools that you use, the words that you use, even down to the type of music that you use, shall not be used to imply something that isn't true, characteristics or functions which these products actually don't have. And this is because you need the consumer to make an informed decision, and they can only do that if they understand what you are trying to say or what you're trying to present. And that can only take place if you've complied with all the other criteria as well. And so you don't want to be misleading them, because false information, even if it's factually correct, there's that for you, is basically you are causing a problem. You are breaking the law, basically. So a commercial practice can be misleading if it contains false information and is untruthful in any way. And of course, as you well know, that social media is basically burning with this type of information. And what we need to take into account is the deceit of it, because you are deceiving the consumer. The consumer is not a statistics. The consumer is an individual. They are a live human being, and it is up to them to make their own decisions about what they do as regards to the choice of a cosmetic product based on its claim. And in this instance, of course, we're talking about safe beauty claims. And one thing I would like to highlight, although A, B, and C are very important, certainly in point C, is we need to be careful about the commitment or the motive for the commercial practice. So if you are actually deciding, I am deliberately going out there to misinform the consumer, you are breaking the law. So what about safe beauty claims? Well, I've grouped them into these headings, though there are probably a few more. Primarily, they are those that state that the products will do no harm to the person, so that's their skin, their eyes, etc. Those that state that products will do no harm to the environment, and those that state an absence of a particular ingredient or group of ingredients, and those that actually state that the product is safe. Now, whilst some of these are legal, many of them are not. And so let's look at some examples. I've grouped them into three, though I'm sure we could probably make some subgroups as well. The first is immunology. And this group is very, very important for safe beauty claims because it refers to the interaction of a product and its ingredients on the skin. In other words, will this product cause an irritant response, or will it cause an allergy response? And as you know, we are required that when we put cosmetic products on the market for the consumer, we do various degrees of patch testing. We might even do, shall we say, some eye studies if we're selling shampoos, for example, or facial cleansers. And we need to be able to show that the product is not going to irritate the skin. And these studies are done in credible institutes supported by dermatologists as well as ophthalmologists. And so these are very, very important. And they do allow you, the results allow you to actually make a safe beauty claim, such as those that I have listed. But then you have these other claims, and I group them under two headings. The first one is environmental. And often you see claims where, as you say, you have a natural or an organic product, and the claims are implying that because they are natural or organic, they're safe. That's not true. You probably find that a synthetic product is probably far more safe than a natural product, because a natural product may well have destroyed part of the environment it's being planted in, for example. And also they're trying to say that vegan products are more safe, which is not true, because vegan products are only about not containing either animal ingredients, animal-derived ingredients, or having been tested on animals. And then you have claims such as doesn't harm the environment, but how on earth do you understand that claim? What does it even mean? And the same with total sun protection. These are impossible claims to justify. And then you have the chemical claims. You all remember the paraben-free debacle. I mean, yes, it's true that a number of parabens have been found to be a problem, and they have been removed from the cosmetics industry, certainly here in the European Union, while there are other parabens that there's nothing wrong with them at all. And then you have other so-called free-from claims. You have people really banging on about that, sulfate-free, SLS-free, but SLS isn't used in cosmetic products. It's used in safety studies as a control, but it's not actually used in a cosmetic ingredient. So why make it? And that now you can justify, for example, fragrance-free, because fragrance-free then refers to the immunology, because people do have sensitization, for example, reactions. And so these need to be dealt with. But then you sometimes, or have seen it, as people have seen, these chemical-free, non-toxic, and these clean claims, and you just wonder, it's got to the point now where we are clean washing and not just greenwashing. Because if you want a chemical-free product, then, maybe you should reconsider what you are actually eating. So perhaps if you stopped eating, stopped breathing, and stopped being on planet Earth environment, you might get away with it. But we are made up of chemicals, so chemical-free really is a problem claim, because it hasn't been well thought out. It hasn't been properly communicated to the consumer what this actually means. And so we've seen a backlash when it comes to safe beauty claims. As I said earlier about the paraben debacle, this non-toxic claim. And it's just driven this movement of misinformation, and it's very, very hard to keep up with it. And of course, here in the European Union, many of these claims are just not allowed, whereas they probably are elsewhere until the respective legislatures catch up with it. And so, you know, because I work in claims all the time, I've actually really thought about this, and I've actually come to the conclusion: has the consumer become so terrifying that we as an industry have to make these claims, or are we guilty because we made the consumer terrifying by making them terrifying because we created the opportunity for these types of claims? So what is it that we are not doing, or what is it that we are perhaps ignoring as an industry, that this has all happened? Because, as you can see at the bottom of the slide, you know, once a brand or an ingredient, for example, as we've seen on social media, or just in brands' websites, you know, once they've started something, everyone else follows because they don't want to seem foolish. You know, they're like sheep, even if that's something that they're following really is foolish. And a classic example of this is if you basically follow the news around the COVID vaccines. That's a classic example of this happening there. And the biggest problem we've had, and that we still continue to have, I was actually discussing this with a customer of mine earlier, is that the biggest communication problem that we have is that we don't listen or even read to actually understand. We just want everything fast, you know, and everything is swipe left on the smartphone, and we listen or read to reply. It's all about clickbaiting and the like. We don't actually take the time out to digest and cogitate the information that we're dealing with. And so we have this information disorder, and we've created an architecture of misinformation, and it's being left unchallenged, even though we are challenging it, because it is just grown into this enormous moving machine, and the damaging effects on the industry has already started. And as Tim Berners-Lee said, and he's the guy who invented the internet, basically said that we need a web that spreads truth rather than the rubbish that we see out there. So what are the solutions? You know, when we see the media out there, you know, making all of this wonderful information that people are lacking up that isn't true, it is how do we deal with it? And I had a problem the other day where I was working on a project with a client, and we'd been going through some peer-reviewed scientific journals evaluating the chemical constituents of a particular natural ingredient. It was an oil derived from a seed. And we'd gone through all the chemistry of it, all the structural formulae, and gone through, you know, PubMed and everything as regards to this. And we had found exactly what was in the seed oil, and everything else was from the rest of that particular tree. But then we did a general Google search that picks up then all the marketing information. And there was this article out there that actually said that this seed oil contained certain active principles. And of course, when you went back into the scientific literature, you found that those active principles were not in the seed oil. They were actually in the bark and the root of the tree. And so there's all this misinformation out there. There is the lack of fact checking, and this is causing a problem. And in the long run, it was actually making, or likely to make, that particular ingredient unsafe, right? So this goes back to safe beauty. So what are we going to do about it? Well, it's all about expectations and viewpoint. And first and foremost, facts have to matter. They really must. I cannot emphasize that strongly enough. So it's not just about the images, the words, and shall we say, the pretty bits of the product. It's the expectation from the whole claim combined with the expectation of the product. And you need to understand your safe beauty claims. What are you actually implying? And what is actually factual? You need to separate the wood from the trees in this regard. And you also have to obviously see it from the consumer viewpoint as well, because will they actually understand you? Because there's a lot of fluff, as you know, when it comes to the marketing of cosmetic products. And you need to be able to read through that fluff to get to the facts, right? Especially if you are making a more serious safe claim, such as irritancy, for example, non-irritant. And there are esteemed colleagues of mine who are presenting also today, and so they will go through that in more detail with you. And of course, you know, with any claim, we have to provide a body of evidence that supports the whole claim. And so once you have developed your claims and you put everything together, you then have to challenge it before you put it on the market. You don't want to wait until it's on the market and then have the, you know, wait for the complaints to come in and the inspecting authorities. So you really do need to be careful. So if we break this down, because here we're looking at alternative truths and the dangers of indifference. Now, I've been in the industry a long time, for more than 30 years, and our industry continues to learn the hard way. It really does. So when it comes to, in this context, safe beauty claims, it's about the clarity of the information, the clarity of the data that we have, and being able to demonstrate what benefits outweigh the risks. It's also about the amount that we have. We complain sometimes that we don't have enough, or it's not enough, or sometimes too much data can be a problem because then it starts becoming a millstone. And then added to that, of course, is this perception growth. You know, you've seen how, for example, the issue around parabens just blew up like a mushroom. And as a result of that, no one is using parabens anymore. And we are seeing poor quality products on the market because they just don't have the choice that they need of preservatives, because now we're having to find alternative preservatives that will stop, you know, shall we say, enable a longer shelf life of them. And certainly here, I've seen many products in store and you just pick them up and they've just collapsed just because they have become buggy, if you like. And then we have, obviously, decisions are being based on this disinformation and misinformation. And of course, this is all being jivvied up by the press and the social media. And as we know, that the press like to steer it up, because I've often been interviewed by the press and I never get to see the articles that they publish before they go out. And that can be a problem, particularly where they are not fact checking. And the beauty press does have a problem here. And as I said earlier, once somebody starts something, we all follow like sheep because we don't want to seem foolish, and we're all competitors anyway, so we want to get one over on each other and be the first out there to get the big sales. And we tend to forget that, you know, what we're actually following is probably irrelevant anyway. And then we have the issues where we have our regulatory systems and our industry politics are actually struggling to cope. And as a result of that, you know, the doubt and suspicion in consumers, once it's created, it's very hard to get rid of. And when we are looking at safe beauty, it is in a way like this goldfish bowl environment, because every single thing, it's scrutinized by every Joe blog, you know, everyone is scrutinizing it. It's also politicized, both in and out the industry. It's turned around, misrepresented, and it becomes a problem. And so the 4 Ps, as I call them, these key factors that we need to get to grips with are PR, that's to avoid collective anxiety. The processes by which we work with, you know, is the logic of our bureaucracy are too rigid. Politics, and I'm not just talking about the government politics here, I'm talking about the industry that we work in, and also within our competitors, you know, as our politics as regards to us being competitors, as well as us being a happy family industry. And then, of course, the punters, these are the consumers, and certainly the uneducated ones or have a problem, because what will happen is if they make the wrong decision, they can make or break a product or even a brand. And then finally, we have hazard versus risk. Now, it's always big news to focus on the hazard, and rarely, and more often than not, the risk is not taken into account to the same degree. And often you'll find that the benefit actually outweighs the risk. So need some caution there. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. And if you would like to get in touch with me, please do so. And also you can join me on LinkedIn. I produce each month the column on claims insights for Eurocosmetics to Go. It's a free newsletter, so you can follow me there. And as some of you may already know, I've actually made a simple guide to cosmetic claims in the consumer in a book, which you will find on Amazon. So thanks very much. Thank you, Jen.